on his high expectations for Tua, who did lead the league in passing last year. Okay, see, I like serious Tyreek. I think when he's serious and not kind of in character.
I can't believe you made this graphic.
I did not make it. I don't know how to make the graphics. Josh made this graphic. It's the last 2 seasons. We know that Mahomes had a down year. We also don't have Super Bowl wins or playoff wins or wins
when
it's less
there's a
than
light
65
breeze or
degrees.
it's a little brisk.
But in the last 2 seasons, he's right there neck and neck. So I'm just saying it's not out of left field where some of the things Tyreek has said about Tua did seem to be out of left field.
But okay, go ahead.
You can add Tua MVP on the board.
No.
On the board?
Last year he led the league in passing yards and didn't get a single 5th place vote.
You know what it was?
What?
Bad marketing.
No.
He
Because
had 29 total touchdowns. How many total touchdowns did Lamar have?
He had the 4th most interceptions. He couldn't beat
29.
a playoff team.
Yeah,
he was 10-1 against non-playoff teams. Yeah. They faded down the stretch.
They faded down the stretch.
He looked terrible in the playoffs.
I know.
Yeah, and he is on the board. He's 9th on the board according to DraftKings, and that's probably right where he should be.
I don't buy DraftKings.
Yeah, well,
look, I'm not a gambler, but I'd say that's exactly where he belongs.
Chose violence today.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, wild.
Yes,
it's when you said he had bad marketing. By that you meant they let the games be on TV?
No.
And people could see who the most valuable player on his own team was? Because that was Tyreek.
Crazy.
Like, that's what when Tyreek showed up on the MVP ballots.
Tyreek got 60 votes.
Right, exactly.
Who's throwing the ball? What is he doing? Those handoffs?
But
end arounds?
Can I show you a number real quick? Because this is, I don't think it's on the board because I don't think he's good enough. But I know you're a Tua guy and your arguments are sound. The problem is, yes, there's the playoff team element, which is a problem. There's the cold weather element, which, yes, there's a problem. But there's also the fact that every year of his career, not just because of the elements, he has trailed off at the end.
Yeah.
So we can show it to you. The player he is September through November for his career, that is MVP caliber. Honest to God. And the player he is December through January is get benched caliber. And so, so I looked at that. I was like, is that just the cold weather?
Yeah.
It's not.
In 2021, he had 0 cold weather games in December, went 4-4 with a 75 rating. In 2022, before the final concussion, he only had 1 cold weather game down the stretch. And had an 81 rating. When I said 4-4, I meant touchdown interception ratio. And then it was 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And then last year, I looked at the final game of the regular season. The reason they were in Kansas City, that game was in Miami. And I looked it up today. I was like, what was the weather on that January 7th evening in Miami? It was 71 degrees. And he threw for 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, and a 63 rating. In
fairness, that's chilly for Miami.
Okay, sure. But he has trailed off at the end of every year of his career, which is another reason I don't think it's on the board.
I'm with you here, and I got it's
not even on the board.
It's not on the board, and I'll add to why. But I said it because the season that he had, how he started off last year, is just not sustainable. The way that he's played, you just alluded to it with all the numbers. I don't even have to go down that road, but I'll go down another path. Another reason why it's not even on the board. And you've said this about another player because of the talent that's surrounding that other player.
Purdy.
Brock Purdy. It's not on the board because of who he plays with. There's no way we watch the Miami Dolphins and we look at that team and they're having success and our attention doesn't go to Tyreek Hill. It just doesn't happen. You said this, and I kind of.
It's hard if you're not the best player on your own side of the ball. If you're not the
best player on your own side of the ball, and when we think of your team, and when we think of impact players on your team, you're not the first one we think of. It's not on the board.
Mahomes was kind of.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to talk about this. I'm bummed that Greg said that because he took what I was going to say. That's why Tua's MVP is not on the board. Nothing to do with any of these numbers. Nothing to do with the fact that they trail off at the end or whatever, even though I think some of that can be misleading, especially because some of those numbers are before Mike McDaniel was even the head coach. And quite frankly, I don't care what he did with Brian Flores. Those numbers and what he was able to do then means nothing to me, quite frankly. I only care about the Mike McDaniel years. But with that said, he absolutely is treated like Brock Purdy in that regard, where no one sees any of his numbers. Because, yeah, look at that. Like, even we saw Nick. Let me see if I can bring it back up. Nick was scoffing at this. And Nick is so much all about the numbers. And this is what I always point out against Nick, where he uses the numbers when they prove the point that he wants to. But when they disprove his point, he says the numbers are a joke because these are concrete numbers. Last 2 seasons, look at this. He's got Patrick Mahomes beat, in completion percentage, yards per pass, touchdown percentage, passer rating, that's real stuff. And then again, before you come and say, oh, well, who has Mahomes had? Nick has talked about how Andy Reid is the GOAT offensive coach, that Travis Kelce is the GOAT tight end. He kept calling Rashee Jerry Rice, or Jerry Rashee Rice. So he thinks Rice is great. He thinks Pacheco is a top running back. Those are some weapons then. Those are legitimate weapons. Not to mention, obviously, in the other years before this, is you're having someone like a Tyreek Hill juice up some of your stats. So you can't just always say that it's because of the weapons or lack of weapons, not to mention coaching. That's why I never live and die by all the numbers, quite frankly. I always try to unpack them to the best of my abilities, highlight them when I think it's actually relevant, and kind of pick them apart when I think they're being misleading. Because if you did just look at this, you would say, oh, wow, Tua's arguably a better quarterback. If you just looked at these numbers, you would say, if I had to draft between one of these quarterbacks, I'm going to pick Tua over Mahomes. And I think it's obvious that that's not the right move. No matter how much of a Tua fan you are, you're still going to have to pick Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is fundamentally a better quarterback. That just can't be denied from my viewpoint. But with all that said, that doesn't mean that I don't think that Tua can't be potentially an MVP caliber quarterback. I'm looking at Tua this next year, this coming year and the year after. To me, that's where it all comes down to now. Again, I don't care what happened in the very beginning of his career. It took a minute or two for him to get going with Mike McDaniel, and now here we are. Okay? That's the way I'm looking at it. He had to be developed. He had to kind of be rebuilt from some of the issues that he had within his first couple of years, and now here he is. So to me, for Tua right now, it is very much sink or swim. The problem is, even when he executes this offense flawlessly and does a great job and puts up cartoonish video game numbers, he doesn't get the credit. They give the praise to the coaching. They give the praise to Tyreek, Waddle, everyone else but him, which is exactly what happens to Brock Purdy. I mean, there's nothing that I can see Brock Purdy doing to win the MVP either. And was a huge reason why they went to the Super Bowl. And it's like the Tua hasn't even won a playoff game. So I just think it's just going to be so hard for Tua to overcome that narrative. Now, the only difference between Tua and Brock Purdy is from a narrative perspective. I think people in the media root for Tua more than they do Brock Purdy. It feels to me that people are more willing to try to pull down publicly a Brock Purdy than they are a Tua. Not all the time, but people do largely want to see Tua succeed. People were all rooting for Tua to get paid. They wanted him to get paid, whereas people are already trying to say the 49ers shouldn't pay Brock Purdy. That's the difference to me. But both fan bases love their quarterback tremendously. So if you're a fan of either of these quarterbacks, it's not a matter of the fan perception. I'm just talking about the media and just general public perception. But Tua definitely has his work cut out for him to kind of move beyond the narrative of he's only good because of the team around him. And that is part of the problem, because he wasn't that great in the beginning of his career. Then he got a new coach. Then he got some weapons. Now he's significantly better. And they're like, well, yeah, it's because of that. It's because of him. But at the same time, Brock Purdy never got a chance to play without those weapons. And he hit the ground running with who he had, with Shanahan, with Christian McCaffrey, with Ayuk, with Debo. And yet it still hasn't helped him either. So it just seems like once you get that target on your back, once you get classified as a system quarterback, or you're just only successful because of the people around you, it just becomes very hard to shed, especially if you're not balling out in the playoffs. I feel as though if Brock Purdy balled out in the playoffs, ended up winning that Super Bowl, stepping up and making a perfect throw when he needed it to, finally, beat the Kansas City Chiefs, that then would have shed that narrative. And then this season, he would have, they would have given him more credit. Where if he continued to ball out, then I think, on the back of a Super Bowl, then I think he could win an MVP. Tua has not done that. If Tua goes out and balls out against the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs and beats them and knocks them out, that then will significantly help him. But at this point, I don't think Tua can do anything in the regular season that will make people believe that he is the MVP. He is the reason why the Dolphins are winning. He has to step up in the playoffs. And I know the MVP is a regular season, but again, it's all opinion based. It's all narrative building. It's all perception. And that's the problem. A lot of people blame Brock Purdy for not being good enough or not being special enough in order to overcome the Kansas City Chiefs and beat them. And because of that, he now continues to have that track record of, that perception of, being carried by his team more than him doing the carrying. And that's what we see with Tua. So I don't see an MVP on the board for this season. But if he can ball out this season, play big time in the playoffs, then the following season, I think he can be back on the board and finally shed that. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. Do you think it's possible that Tua could win the MVP this season? Or do you think it's just too hard of a narrative for him to go up against? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.